The labor market for small businesses is strengthening. That's according to data from the Small Business Labor Index. Our Marcus Walter has more on this edition of Who's Hiring.
The labor market for small businesses is strengthening, this according to CBiz Small Business Employment Index. The index, according to CBiz, tracks payroll and hiring trends for over 3,700 companies with 300 or fewer employees, saw a seasonal adjusted increase of 1.59% in April, meaning an improving labor market for small businesses. CBiz says that consumer demand remains strong and hiring is gaining positive momentum as businesses prepare for the summer months. CBiz is also saying that there's a shift in consumer spending from big-ticket items to experience-based activities, driving arts, entertainment, and recreation businesses to add staff. The regional index data shows a hiring gain for every region in the United States for April. The Northeast, at 2.3%, reported the largest hiring gain, followed by the Southeast at 1.61% and the Central region at 1.51%. The index also reported a slight increase in the West at 0.58%. On an industry level, the most notable hiring increases were seen in the arts and entertainment, transportation and accommodation, and outdoor spaces. Real estate and construction experienced hiring declines. This is happening even as small businesses are faced with inflation-related concerns and labor shortages. While the CBiz Index suggests an improving labor market for small businesses, there are reports to the contrary. The National Federation of Independent Businesses, a Tennessee-based association of small business owners, says that the labor supply is not responding strongly to small businesses, high wage offerings, and the impact of inflation has significantly disrupted business operations. Still, things may be looking up for small businesses looking to hire across the U.S. and even in the state line. For your home team, I'm Marcus Walter.